Now, I posted a story a couple of months ago asking you guys if you'd be interested in learning about the businessy side of Florence James Collective. And 98% of you said yes. The other 2%, fuck off, would ya? Now, before we start, you might be asking yourself, Huzi, what makes you an expert on this topic? Well, this does. That's right, guys. I am, in fact, the accountant. Okay, I'm not like legitimately an accountant, but I had a friend make this up, so I have more credibility now. This is pretty cheap to get made up, by the way, guys, and it looks pretty legit. On the serious side, I actually have a deep passion for finance and economics. I know, fitting my stereotype well. And I'm actually about to start my honors year at university, which doesn't make me an expert, believe me, but at least allows me to break through some of the complex terminology that business people like to use just to feed their own egos and make them seem like madmen. But the part that has worked for me was being able to directly apply what I learned into my content creation business. Now, you don't have to have a content creation business to follow along with this series, but I'm gonna use those kinds of examples into real world application. So what I'm about to say, don't take it as advice, but it's just what I personally did in my business. So let's start at the very beginning. The first thing you gotta do is choose a business structure. And just like choosing a camera, some are fun and some are less fun. But seriously, there are pros and cons to all different structures, and we're gonna cover those today. Now, I'm gonna speak directly on business structures here in Australia, but there are very similar equivalents all around the world. For example, PTY Ltd is very similar to our LLC in the United States with some minor differences. So the very first one that every entrepreneur has popped their cherry to is a sole trader. Now, this is a very simple business structure to follow. Sole meaning one, so there's only one owner, and basically there's no separation between the owner and the business. So if the business messes up, you mess up, and if you mess up, the business messes up. Did I say that right? This presents some pretty big cons associated with the structure. Because you're personally liable, say for instance, you sign a contract to deliver content by a certain date to your client. The date comes along and you still can't get Capture One to connect. Or Photoshop is crashing more times than what's something that crashes a lot, Jess?
2 hours later.
Damn it, I thought something would come to me. So basically you missed the deadline. And now the client comes to you and says, hey, we had a deadline scheduled and we had a launch based off that deadline. We missed it and now we missed out on thousands of dollars of revenue. Guess what? You, sir, are personally liable for that. Which means that the assets that you personally own and have got nothing to do with the business are at risk. But we'll be covering indemnities in a separate video, and there's nothing to stress about. Don't worry, you'll have insurances and stuff that will protect you against this ever happening. It rarely ever happens. Some of the other cons associated with this structure are you miss out on some tax breaks that you would get with a PTY Ltd. And also it can be very hard to expand your business in the future. However, it's not all bad. There are some very neat pros to this structure, and that is very simple and cheap to set up. You can do it entirely by yourself, and you don't even need a separate bank account to do it. However, for the love of God, have a separate bank account. Also, there are fewer compliance things that you got to go through, which means less paperwork. You don't have to fill out as much forms, and nobody likes paperwork. So one thing I forgot to elaborate on, I said that it might be hard to expand your business in the future if you're a sole trader. The reason why I say that is, say for instance, you want to expand by getting a new studio space or buying a motion control system, something like that, and you want to finance it through a bank. If you're a sole trader and even a partnership, which is the next structure we're going to be talking about, they're going to look at your personal finances as well as the businesses, and that can get really complicated. That takes us to our next structure, which is the partnership. The absolute trash, pond scum, rubbish, bullshit structure ever. And I can say that because Florence James Collective actually traded under that structure for the first 2 to 3 years of its business cycle. And it was an absolute mess. So basically the same principles apply in terms of pros and cons as I mentioned in the sole trader business structure. Except this time there's one massive plot twist, and that is that you and your partner, hence the name partnership, are agents of the business. What that means is that either one of the partners can enter into a contract on behalf of the business, and both of you are jointly liable for it. That is a big reason why I say the partnership structure is a mess. You get all the cons of the sole trader and plus some and no pros. This leads us to the big boy, the propriety limited business structure, also known as a PTY LTD. This structure provides separation from you and your business. Basically, the business is acting as a separate entity. Some say that you are protected by the corporate veil, which basically means if the business messes up, you personally are not liable for it. That leads us to our first big pro of the structure. You are as separate from it as your consciousness when you are editing plain e-commerce photography, which is insane. This basically gives the business the ability to enter into contracts by itself as its own separate entity. That means the liabilities of the business is its own liabilities and you are not liable for it personally, so your assets are protected. On the flip side, the assets that the business acquires is its own asset. This structure also makes it easier to expand and grow your business. Remember that example that I gave before where you might be interested in buying a studio or maybe acquiring more equipment to benefit your business in the future. In doing so, you might want to borrow some capital from a bank instead of being out of pocket thousands and thousands of dollars, which, to a certain degree is a sensible thing to do. Now, when that bank looks at your business, it's going to look at what structure you're in. And if it's a sole trader or a partnership, it's going to take into account your personal finances and your personal liabilities. Where I think it actually advantages us the most is giving us the confidence to actually acquire those funds. Because remember, the business is liable for it. So if you have a house or something like that and you don't want to put it up as collateral, you don't have to be scared that, if something goes wrong, they're going to be coming after your personal asset. The next pro to this business structure is credibility. It might seem very odd, what I'm saying, but picture this. You're on a set and a client sees you with your mirrorless camera. The perception that you're giving off, the client might be thinking like, oh God, like we're paying all this money. I thought I was gonna have this big, massive camera with HMI lights or something like that. But you come with a smaller camera and you can get the job done. That is the same thing with business structure. You might be able to get the job done with the other, structures that I've mentioned in this video. Big clients and other suppliers actually look into this stuff. So they'll do an ABN search and see how long you've been trading for and what kind of company structure you have. I know this personally because other clients have told me about it, but yeah, that's just another thing to consider that it does add to the credibility of your business. There's another structure that we could talk about, which is a trust setup, which is just an extension of the corporate structure. I'm not gonna get into that, otherwise this video is gonna be like 20 minutes long and I'm sure you guys are like, wrap it up. I know this video had a lot of content to consume and content that we're probably not familiar with digesting, like it's not a creative concept at all. So I'm gonna have like a little summary slide that compares all the differences between the structures spoken about in this video on a separate slide. So it's easy for you to just look at and process and use it as a cheat sheet if you need to. There are in fact a lot more pros and cons than what I've mentioned in this video. But again, I don't want to make this like a 40-50 minute video. I will have a more detailed breakdown in the course regarding the different structures and what's the most appropriate for you and what was the most appropriate for us when we were selecting, based off our content creation business. Now, before I wrap this video up, I'll quickly talk about the structure that we, Florence James Collective, are trading under. Now, we made the change about 3 years ago and we are now trading under as a propriety limited. We switched over from a partnership structure. One thing I wish that someone told us when we made the change was that in doing so, your business gets a complete reset. And that's why I say, if you're considering running your business for a long time and being in this industry for a long time, if you're still trading as a sole trader or a partnership structure, consider making the change to a PTY LTD sooner rather than later. One of the problems that we faced was that shortly after making the change, we decided to go for a loan for something. And when we did, the banker was like, bro, you've only been trading for like 2 months. And I was like, excuse me? 2 years and 2 months, good sir. And it turns out that doesn't matter because when you change your business structure, it's a complete reset and everything starts at that date when you make the change. And that same sentence was said to us when a client said that they thought that we've been in this for a lot longer than what we have been. Again, they did an ABN search on us and found out that we've only been trading for 2 months. We were actually trading for, 2 years and 2 months. But again, that didn't matter because the new ABN takes precedent over all of it. Well, there we have it, folks. We are completely done with the first video talking about business structures. The next video will again be a creative one. But if you guys want to hear more videos about the business stuff, let us know. Give us a like, give us a thumbs up. Everything that YouTube recommends, please do so. Bye-bye.